All right. So this is our last session of the day. But after this session, if you would like a WE3 T-shirt, we have WE3 T-shirts in the front for you. Please be sure to grab one before you leave today. So for our last panel, I'd like to introduce you to Trevor Larocque, PwC partner, who will be moderating our next session for us.
So my name's Trevor Larocque. Yes, I'm a partner with PwC. I lead our customer power and utilities practice based out of San Jose, California. I'm also Canadian, though, so you'll still hear the out and about from me. I've been here for a long time, but I can't get rid of the out and about. I apologize, I guess. Not really. So I'm going to moderate this panel, which is our CXO Roundtable. It's the global roundtable, and I think that's relevant. And the reason why I think that's relevant is we've heard all day today about the challenges that we're all seeing. They're not customer challenges, they're not individual utility challenges, they're not even jurisdiction challenges, they are global in nature. And I feel like this event, we've all been to conference after conference in our entire career. Today, this is my first WE3 event, by the way, but today felt like we are a community of solvers. And we're all coming together to try to solve for these existential problems that we saw in the morning. That I have an 11-year-old and 8-year-old that I'm nervous about what their life's going to look like when they're 50 like I am. So bringing it together, I think this is a great way to finish off our day one of WE3. And what we're going to do now is we're going to bring up multiple people, thought leaders that some of them you've met, some of them you haven't, onto the stage, and we're going to get a global perspective from different parts of the globe. We'll have them talk about their imperatives, their challenges that they're seeing specific to their markets, and how they're going about solving these with this concept of a community of solvers, but I'll extend that to what we've been talking about is a connected platform, a connected ecosystem to solve these challenges. And we'll talk to them about how are they connecting dots within their own ecosystems to solve these problems. So first, Norbert Jung, am I pronouncing your last name properly? Vice President of Siemens Product and Portfolio Management. Thank you, Norbert. Nice to meet you. Take your pick.
Thank you.
Next, we'll call up Thomas Lord, Vice President, CIO of UGI. Thank you, Thomas. Herman Ng from Liberty. Thank you. Senior Director of Data and Decisions. Thank you. And last but not least, we have James Douglas. I apologize, James. Being Canadian, I should have known you. Come on up from Alectra Utilities. CXO. All right, guys. So I'm going to start with you, Norbert. I'm coming to you first because we're going to look at get an overview of what you guys are dealing with in Europe, what you see as challenges, and then what problems are you guys solving from a Siemens perspective for the continent of Europe. How's that for a broad starting point?
All right. So that's a broad starting point.
And money doesn't matter.
And money doesn't matter. Well, I mean, look, I think it goes around the world, right, that we're all looking after a net zero world. And certainly in Europe, everything started with the EU Green Deal, and we see a influx of distributed energy resources. EV car charging is happening, solar, rooftop solar, wind power generation, connected to the transmission grids, all happening. And, this is a great place, right? Because this industry is going through disruption like this. And all seem to be out there in the future. And yes, utilities were dealing now with bidirectional power flows in the grid versus unidirectional, like nuclear power station in the center, consumers around, power flows very steadily, right? And now with this network of the grid where we have DERs all over in this maze, what was the other term that they used? A mesh that they used in the other discussion. That's more complex to operate. And This causes challenges for utilities, but this all seemed to be out there in the future. And now more recently with, let's say, certainly the Ukraine war of Russia and Russia stopping the gas supply to Western Europe that we had relied upon for the last few decades. That's now a new situation. And all of it, what seemed to be out there so far in the future, now is so urgent, right? And this comes in a situation where also happens to be coincidental that the nuclear power stations in France, half of them are in maintenance right now. So suddenly you find that our customers are sitting next to the energy ministers of the countries on stage explaining to the public how we're going to keep the living room warm in winter. So those are some of the challenges that we face.
Wow. How would you say that you are positioned, or some of the solutions you see in Europe trying to solve for maybe not the half the nuclear power plants in France are in maintenance and the war in the Ukraine, but how are you seeing some of the challenges through data, I guess, is how I would describe it, being solved for in Europe that may or may not be different from here in North America?
Look, the one thing is to have enough generation to meet the demand. The other thing is to have it in the right place. And this is where the electrical grid comes in. And what we do, certainly with Siemens and the grid software unit that we have, we help utilities basically plan, operate, and optimize that electrical grid. We're a global business. I love to speak globally, right? About the challenges that happen in Asia during the pandemics when people work at home and suddenly the air conditioning at home is running up, and this causes a different stress on the transformer in that district if everybody is now suddenly working from home and drives up the aircon. But certainly, for example, in the country where I live in Germany, we have huge wind power generation in the North Sea in northern Germany, and the industry, so the major consumer, is in southern Germany, and the transmission lines that would need to be built to transport the power from north to south, the regulatory process to get those approved is just a 10-year process. Sorry, this is going to happen way too late to resolve that, to bring that power down, so that in economic terms, the renewable power that was not taken off the grid is worth 1.3 billion euro 2 years ago, 2.3 billion euro last year, and this year we guess we're up at 2.3 billion euro already half into the year, right? So that is a huge economic problem to transport the power from the renewable generation to the consumer.
Thank you for that.
Now, like just to maybe add on with data. One key theme that is also driving our partnership with SEW, for example, right, is that previous discussion was on digital twin, right, that all of our departments and most of the IT applications that we use, they have been designed with a single purpose in mind, to service that one department really, really well. Now, for a utility to make a step change, I believe that we'll have to have all our IT applications work really well together and exchange data among them. A good example is American Electric Power, right, that are using a so-called digital twin to basically create a single source of truth for planning, for protection, for operations, for maintenance, to work on the same set of data instead of each department bringing their own data, right? So that a meeting is not the half of the meeting to discuss the common base of data that we discuss upon, but to actually solve problems. Or for an engineer, to not spend half of their day looking for the right data for the engineering task at hand, but to really drive down, but really have that engineering data at hand, right at the fingertips. So that basically, if you reduce the effort to find the right data by 60%, that engineers, if half of their day is finding data, it can be 30% more productive. So what could they do with that available time? So, and that is just on a transmission level that they make this happen. It's called T-Nexus project. The challenge on the distribution level is so much greater, right? Because the number of nodes that you have on a distribution level is like 5 times the one that you have on a transmission level. So that is a challenge that we're now going to address, and that is I think
the next mountain to climb.
The next mountain to climb, exactly.
So Herman, I'm going to come to you next. So I had the luxury or the privilege of being asked to ride along with a utility here in the US way back in 2017, that if you were to say, hey, come sit on a panel, we're going to talk about a CXO role, you would be looked at like you had a third eye back, and it was only 5 years ago. We have come a long way in only 5 years. And as Norbert was talking, one of the insights came out of that road trip, and we talked to a lot of people. We visited all sorts of manufacturers and different companies like yours, or some up in the Silicon Valley. There were some themes that came out of that. Like, my favorite is get used to change. The only thing that you can predict is that change is here to stay, and it's only going to ever increase. So the need to be flexible. This concept was also around thinking around iterative value delivery. How do we keep things rolling? But digital equaled data. And I was sitting back there two sessions ago, and Julia from Alectra was talking, we were talking, data equals digital or digital equals data. And this concept of a connected platform of how fast we've been capturing data for 120 years out of a power utility grid. Well, how can we capture the data, but also then make it into insights? And how quickly can we action that data? And the faster and faster, we're going to need to do that faster and faster. And so Herman, as the Senior Director of Data and Insights for Liberty, can you talk to us a little bit about how you guys are leveraging the data, maybe some of the challenges you guys are experiencing, and how you're solving that with connected data within the utility? And you guys are also global. You do sit in different countries.
Yeah, we do sit in different countries. So we're in the US, in Canada, in Bermuda, in Chile, and Spain. So definitely a global footprint. I think before I get into the connectedness about data, just want to maybe share an analogy of idea versus innovation, right? So an idea, anybody can have an idea in their head. Whether it gets off the shelf to become useful, to have insights, that's innovation, right? So, right, we've been collecting lots of data for years. There are tons of SCADA data in our infrastructure, in our OT footprint. But the thing is, what have we done with it, right? So the question now is, connecting these dots, which I love to connect dots, and maybe that's why I'm in where I'm in now. And the problem that we're trying to solve is, yes, a lot of times if we just try to do this on a PowerPoint, you get this nice roadmap. But usually it takes too long, too expensive, right? And in utility, I think I heard a comment earlier today too that we're in an industry where traditionally we want to be 110% sure before we move on a lot of things. Things are changing, right? Now, I know this is a broad stroke statement at this day and age. So what my team strive to do as the corporate services for data and analytics for Liberty is that how can we actually produce something quickly for our internal customers, right? And it might not be perfect. It might not be the final thing that they wanted to have, but we always try to ask ourselves, working closely with the business on, hey, if there's one thing you really want to change, that it's not going to be too hard to change, but it's going to make your life much easier, talking about productivity, right, Norbert? What would that be? Let's start with that. And it seems to be that a lot of times people don't even know what data can do for you. They just think that, oh, what you're here for is to automate all my Excel VBAs. And it's a journey to let them to realize that, no, there's a lot more to it than that. And an example would be with the AMI analytics that we have started supporting in some of our regions, one of our regions. They at first really thought, oh, okay, all you're trying to do is just to move some SQL server up to the cloud, and what's the big deal with it, right? But then when they start to realize that, you even just with a year's worth of data, 200,000 customers, you're getting billions of roles, and they realize that how massive this is. And now they start to realize that, oh, okay, so your team's job is really to help us to really create a subset of this that is going to be meaningful for us, so that we can actually do our engineering job and actually release jobs in the field to make a difference to our customers. So that's the magic where how can the data folks and the engineering folks and even some of the community development folks all band together talking about having that community, that network, to really start to make a difference to, frankly, money is not important, but driving down rates, everyone's going to like, right? And as we start to put more technology into the ecosystem, into the infrastructure, rates generally is a belief that it's going to climb. So how do we slow that down, or better yet, try to reduce it through different ways of incentivizing our customers to consume energy differently?
Thank you, Herman. So for us, when I did CIS most of my career, I'm a recovering CIS implementer. For those of you that have ever done a CIS, I think I did over 24 of them in the last 22 years or so. Haven't done them, though, for about 5 years, which I guess my hair isn't falling out anymore. But the point is, I would get upset when people would say, oh, you're just a customer guy. Well, if you know anything about a utility, you know that within a CIS, you have customer data, but you have every financial transaction type of data in there. You have assets, you have equipment, you have meters, you have premises, service points, collection, class control. You have everything within a CIS. And when it comes to data, it's how many utilities have, and I'm not looking for a show of hands here, but how many utilities have struggled with their data mapping, with actually getting insights out of their data? And when we think of the excitement of what the cloud brings to us and the idea of a connected platform, it starts to bring that data faster and faster to the hands of the internal stakeholders that are at a utility. We heard this morning about, and I'm coming to you, James, because I'm going to use that conversation that you had about the disruptible, the demand response rate pilot that you guys did. I know it's not called the OEB anymore, so I won't even try. But and then Jill looked at you and said, seriously, you do a trust score of your customers? And your response was, Uber does it, why not us? And the idea is all that customer data, it's not just customer data that gets put into, and I'm going to be blunt here with SCW, SCM, it helps us to start organizing that data, but it's not just customer data. It's OMS data, it's GIS data, it's financial transactions. It's all there, and now we get to pull it down into a cloud platform, and now suddenly we're able to connect that data and bring insights to the stakeholders to bear. And that's where, James, I'm going to call on you to maybe weave in the customer angle of this to pull that data together, and then the art of the possible, like what you guys did with the trust score, which I thought was fabulous.
Oh, great. No, thanks. So on the note of data, one of the biggest things, it's within the organization and with the customer, it's trusting the information that you're providing them. Because if it comes down to it that you're putting information in front of the customer, what's happening within their home, and it turns into noise, they stop listening to the utility, right? So one of the things that we've realized, and this also goes within the organization too, and is that the accuracy level and the trust level that we're seeing when we get to grid edge is so much higher. And then when you can actually start to see it and that you can identify and really truly report and engage to your customers that this is what we're seeing is happening to help them with what they're trying to do with their own energy profile. The examples that we've seen in the past is about identifying faulty appliances. But when we can actually start using 1 second data at the grid edge and telling a customer they have a problem in the home and how much money it's costing them, that problem, now you're changing the dynamics with the customer because you're trying to, you've identified a problem, you're trying to solve it with them, and then you're also trying to push them down the path to say, this, we're stewards of their data. We're trying to put it in a way that actually makes it usable for them. And then as the operators on the distribution side, it's that same trust in that data that the control room starts believing what they're actually seeing from the grid edge, right? And whereas with AMI 1, the reality was with outage and restoration, the control room had a little bit of lacking of trust of the information that was coming in, right? And but we're now getting to the grid edge side. It's that higher trust level, which means greater strategies on how we can create use cases of engaging customers and also engaging operations.
Love it. And that's building the trust factor with the customers, which brings us back to the fabric that we talked about earlier of when you have the data out to the grid edge, you're actually able to help the customer and they see you as their trust, I know we overuse that term, but their trusted advisor, which then leads them further and further down the path. We talk about ADMS all the time, and if we talk about where this grid is moving, or maybe it's not a grid, maybe it is something different, but as we move further out into that edge, that's the beginning of this transforming relationship between a utility and a customer base. Just talking through ADMS with people about how are you going to control the distribution network like we used to control the generation and transmission network. Yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about is how do we get that into the hands of the customers so that they're a real stakeholder and we're working together as opposed to they pay their bill once a month. You want to say something to that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, for us, it's moving into being a distribution system operator, recognizing generation behind the meter, and then allowing the customer to participate in that marketplace, and then for us to actually to be able to manage those assets, to maintain the reliability, and allowing the lights to keep on. It's the one side of this that we're seeing as part of those struggles, though, is that data is king because we need to be able to articulate to the regulator that here's our strategies. This is the amount of money we have to invest to accommodate and to be able to enable the electrification of the grid. But we're taking into account, here's what we're going to have to build. This is where we will have demand response capabilities. But in the end, there's investments needed. And the problem with the regulators, they're very conservative with this stuff. And so we need to start getting more quantifiable evidence. That's where the data is huge. That if we can start using, there was a session earlier today about talking about how we can actually use the data to help the justification of your EV strategies, or where you're doing more surgical deployments of infrastructure to keep up with it, but the data is driving that so that we're not just doing this overbuild strategy that we would do as utilities. We're doing more of that surgical approach to say, this area we have to build, this area we're going to have demand response, and the data is backing up because you can do simulations and so forth to show it.
And it continues to perpetuate. You guys you talked about the demand response, right? You use the data on the pilot to tell the regulator in Ontario, hey, this is what we could provide. Another example of using that data.
Exactly.
Thomas, I'm going to come to you next. UGI, same type of concept, same type of theme, a type of problem or issue that you guys are dealing with in your jurisdiction and how you guys have overcome
I think I've got to go to the transformation word. Setting a context, I got hired a few years ago to go to UGI to help guide, lead, drive technology-enabled business transformation. And part of that is coming back to, we have systems that go back to the 1980s, 1990s. Our CIS system we replaced a few years ago. I found code laid back in 1969. So I'm serious. And so taking a look at this and listening to everything that we talk about here, Herman talking about data, to me, what the lesson that I've learned, the observation that I have in the exercise I've gone through is that we have oodles of data, technical term there. And the thing with that is, to me, data is knowledge, but the application of knowledge is understanding. And what we lack in a lot of the exercises that I've gone through at work is people know how to execute their jobs. They know that there's data created, but there isn't the causality between information and action. And it's interesting because when Norbert was speaking about the windmills in the North Sea, but the capacity utilization in the south of the country. There again, you had data which probably told you that, but nobody translated that into understanding. So they just put the stuff where it made sense to put it at the time without, so a lot of wind. You put it where there's a lot of wind, but then you got to put the construction, you got to put the manufacturing there. So that to me is how you have to take data, translate it into knowledge, and then apply your process and everything to get understanding to it. That's what your insights are, right? You're trying to get understanding. So a key thing that Jill said to me today that resonated was, she was talking about customers. And one of the big challenges that we have at UGI is we're part of a larger company, multinational company, where the other parts of our business are focused on like retail type stuff. And so our board is driving them to give exemplary, super customer experience. But on the utility side, we just need to do good enough. Sad to say it, Jill was right. You know, if 3 minutes is the response time that is acceptable to the customer, why are you spending millions to get to 2 when they aren't even going to notice it? Take those millions, put them someplace else. So I'm taking those millions and bringing the rest of our business out of the 20th century. So to me, that's, you know, today has been fascinating. And truth be told, I come to a lot of these sessions, and I don't sit through all of the presentations. But today I did. So good job, Deepak and the team.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes. I feel the same way. I was engaged all day long. It felt like a community of solvers sharing. On that note, I also put out to the team that that is the hardest part that's challenging our industry, or at least it feels that way. We're organizing data, we're capturing data, we have the data, but to varying degrees, we are creating insights out of that data. Now, we're doing it on our own. Some might be ahead, some might be back, but my challenge to the industry is, how do you create a community of insights that you feel comfortable, maybe not differentiatingly or a competitive advantage that your company has, but we are living with all the same challenges. I challenge this industry, start sharing insights, how you capture data and how you start making correlations of data that really provide value to your stakeholders and to yourselves. Because I think more events like this, because none of us are going to solve this stuff on our own. Not PwC, not a utility on their own, not Siemens, no offense. But we are
every partner with SEW now.
Yeah, we'll call Deepak, how about that? But we have about a minute left. Is there a question in the audience that someone would like to ask around this connected idea of data and problem solving? Or is everyone just ready to go to dinner? I think we're probably ready to go to oh, Deepak, go ahead.
I don't think so. I have a question, but I just want to just highlight something, for everybody. I think this panel represents the 3 biggest clients, and the partners for us, who trusted to extend that data to all the way to the customer and the mobile workforce. Our biggest partner, SI partner, PwC, and Trevor and the team, and a new partner, the biggest the hardware and software company in the world, who's been serving the electric and water and gas utility. I'm energetic, and I'm very excited to see all of you. It's not about software, it's not about hardware, it's not about data. We are all trying to solve together the problem and the challenges, and we talked about it, and all of you acted long back, and I know Thomas, I was talking to, Thomas is the person, as a CIO in 2018 and 17, going on SAP for utilities conference on the stage and telling everybody you need to get, and I'm sorry, it looked like a little bit marketing for in the sales pitch, but he did that sales pitch to tell on the stage everybody need a STW platform to connect to their customer. And I seen the same thing from Liberty, definitely Herman, Johnny, Jody, same thing, James, Brown, and same thing for when we got in the relationship, like Siemens, believe it or not, we thought definitely it's a very huge company, but the excitement, connectivity is so personal to come at. And same with Trevor, you, Pankaj, and the team, and Amal, Manish, and all, how we get excited to solve this problem. And we started with this conversation. We have to act now because this problem is huge. We can sit and talk, and that's why this conference, this summit is not about talking only. We're acting on it. So thank you guys. Thank you for that.